I knew then that I got to decide the ending. Well, welcome to Living Louder, part 2 of my story. My name is Portia Louder, and I'm going to be talking about prison, which I talk about a lot. Part 1, if you haven't heard it yet, you can go back and listen to it, is about my younger years and what landed me in prison. But now we're going to talk about what happened when I got to the second prison that I was at. So I started out my prison journey in Oakland, California, was transferred on Con Air, which is not a fun experience. You're in chains and shackles and miserable. And then I landed in Minnesota. And now I had no idea where I was going through all this. When they put you, I was put in the SHU, which is a special housing unit, isolation cell. It's kind of scary. I share more about that in the first episode. And then they transferred me and I went to multiple different county jails and eventually landed in Minnesota. And I remember when I was on the bus and we were driving out, Waseca, Minnesota is kind of a small town. We went through all these cornfields. I remember feeling so sad because I could feel the distance from my family. My family lives in Utah. I had 3 young children, 2 older married children at the time that I went to prison, and my husband. I could feel that it was going to be a long time. And it was close to a year before I saw them after I got to Minnesota. When I got to Minnesota, there was a few things that were interesting. One was it was a really nice prison as far as prisons go. Dublin was an old prison and it just felt different. Waseca, Minnesota was a college. It had been a college, then it had been a men's prison, and then a female prison, and there was grass. I loved that. I was excited about the grass. The other thing that's kind of crazy, I went into the chow hall, which is the kitchen, and they had a soda fountain. Now that is bizarre. I remember looking around and thinking, what is going on? Why do they have a soda fountain here? The girls were like, yeah. But apparently they had it left over from the college. And not long after I got there, they did away with the soda. But I thought it was pretty cool. I'm like, you just take your cup and go get soda if you want. And they're like, yeah, that's unusual in prison. So if you want soda, you have to buy it on commissary. And usually it's just a few different kinds. You don't have lots of options, but they had pretty good food there. And they had a nice rec yard. There was a lawn and a track. And I remember when I got to the prison, just sitting under a tree, and I really just cried and cried and cried. I had so much regret and so much pain and sorrow. There's a few things you have to do when you get to prison. You have to figure out what kind of job you're going to have, who you're going to live with. Those are the basics that I didn't understand when I got to prison. If you don't figure it out, they're going to assign you a job and assign you a room, and then it can become difficult to get a different job or a different roommate. So I knew this because I had already done a year in Dublin. So I get to Minnesota and I start looking for a job, and a woman saw me. You kind of get to know your people. There was a woman that had done quite a bit of time that saw me come in, and she came down and said, hey, I'd love to have you as a roommate. You're looking for me, I want a roommate that's quiet, that works. It's not, no nonsense. So she could see that I might be that kind of a person. So she's like, hey, do you want to be in my room? But I did my research. I went and asked other people, tell me about this lady. I need to know. One thing I found out was that she was really picky about keeping a clean room, which means that every morning we wiped down the cell. She would even buff the floors. You could go borrow a buffer at the front from the maintenance department and buff the floor every single morning, which is like a little closet. I mean, there's 3 bunks in this room. There's 2 bunk beds in this cell. Different prisons have different cells. Like these did not have doors. You're locked in the unit pretty much, other than every hour there's a 10-minute move during the day that you can go somewhere else, but you're locked in the unit. But they didn't have doors that you'd be locked in your cell. And they also had community showers and community toilets. So again, sometimes in the cell, you might have your own toilet and there's a door that they could lock, but in this case, that's how it went. So I agreed to move into her room, and I went to the education department to look for a job because they assigned me to the kitchen right when I got to prison. I didn't like that job. I pretty much had an officer yell at me and freak out on me. So I decided, no, I don't want that job. So I ended up finding a job in education, which I liked. So I went to the education department and they didn't have a position open. I remember being down in the rec yard and there was a library down there. That was always my most exciting thing when I went to a new prison. I'm going to go see what new books I have to read. And behind the library, there was this little cement office, and it was called the CRC, or Career Resource Center. It's where women would come to prepare to go home. And when I walked in there, I felt it. I knew it was the right place for me. The woman that kind of ran that department was this really disciplined woman. She was probably 65 plus. She ran every single morning around the track with steel-toed boots on. Like, that's no joke. I can't even run the track alone, let alone with steel toe boots. But that's what she was doing. She didn't spend a dime in that prison. Like commissary. So the way commissary works, it's like a bunch of items from the dollar store. And you can go to commissary once a week and you can buy the things you need if you have money on your books. But this woman took pride in using only prison issued stuff, whether it was clothes or shoes, or like she wouldn't even get a granola bar off the commissary. She would only eat what came out of the kitchen. I think that was just her way of everyone finds their way to do their time. Usually a good routine is helpful in prison, but in this case, she just took it to the next level. And she was a good example to me. And I remember not long after I got to Waseca, sitting out under that tree, and I literally cried and cried and cried. And she came up to me one day and she said, Portia, I can see that you're struggling, and I want you to know something. There are people here that are praying for you. I am one of them. And there are people here and in heaven that want you to succeed. You're in a really good place. Embrace it. You have skills. You have the opportunity to serve others. And then she pointed to these flowers and she said, you see those flowers? Every year they have to die in order to be reborn. Allow yourself to walk through that pain because there's beauty on the other side. It was a real powerful moment for me that somebody cared enough to come and talk to me. And I remember later that day, I was sitting in the commissary department and I had felt a lot of sorrow over the separation from my children. It was heartbreaking for me. And I had had a full-on mental breakdown. I really had before I went to prison because I was so scared to leave them. And while I was sitting in commissary, I had this dream and I remembered back to that mental breakdown, honestly, and how scared I was to leave my children. And I was in a really vulnerable place and I just was having these fearful thoughts. And one of them was that I couldn't get out of prison. I couldn't get back to my children. And while I was sitting in commissary that day, I saw that dream so different. I remember imagining my children walking into a cell and grabbing my hand and saying, Mom, it's time to go. Let's go. And it really felt like it was time for me to move forward. Later that night, funny things happen in prison. They seriously do. And you expect it. So later that night, I'm sitting in the chow hall and I'm eating dinner. And this Hispanic woman, she didn't speak great English, but she walked up to me and she goes, you're glowing, friend. You're glowing. And I said, I just got here. My name's Portia. And she goes, no, I just want you to know that God will bless you when you leave prison because you're here for us. And I said, well, thank you. Kind of a strange thing for someone you don't even know to come say to you, right? But the next morning I went out to that track and I said this prayer. I said, God, I give everything to you. Please help me find a way to be reborn. And I walked around that track that morning and I felt the peace of knowing that it was time to let go of who I thought I was supposed to be and become who I was born to be. And it doesn't mean that the pain went away, but it was a new beginning for me. And I'm grateful that I was at the prison that I was at because I was able to be outside a lot. Whenever I wasn't locked in the unit, and I ended up getting a job in the CRC so that I could just put up a little sign, say, I'm outside, come find me if you need something. It was kind of cool. But I also really took ownership of that position. I started writing curriculum and teaching classes, and I started focusing on serving others. And my soul opened up. There were still a lot of difficult things ahead of me. I had to get honest with myself and take ownership for the mistakes that I made, which was so painful. But I remember I had another experience in the kitchen that was kind of cool. Not long after I got to Waseca, I'm sitting in the chow hall one day for lunch, and this girl walks in and starts screaming right in the middle, praise Jesus, praise Jesus. And everybody looks around and we're like, the kitchen goes quiet, right? Because there's like 200 of us in there making a bunch of noise, and all of a sudden it goes silent. And she goes, I'm going home to my baby. I got clemency. And I didn't hardly even know her. I just started clapping and cheering and crying and hugging each other, people you've never met. And come to find out, this girl had been sentenced to 30 years in prison and had served 14. I got sentenced to 7, but she was sentenced to 30. When she came to prison, she had a newborn baby and her mom had been raising him. And it was really stiff charges back in the 80s and 90s. And if you had anything to do with crack cocaine and you lived in Chicago, you're getting a 30-year prison sentence. It was just nuts. And so she was pretty much buried in prison. I mean, 30 years is a long time. And this woman every day had walked the track. She had taken every class there was, and she worked in the chapel. And every time I saw her name was Angela, she would say, God is good all the time. And I go, "Hey, Angela, what classes did they have today in the chapel?" And she'd go, "I don't know, but God is good all the time." And I'd say, "Angela, God is good." And she'd go, "All the time, Portia. Yes, he is." That was just what she said, no matter where everyone knew that about Angela. I ended up getting a job as a photographer, and I remember the day that I took her pictures. She wanted one last picture in prison before she went home. And talk about a blessed thing to experience and see. After so many years, 14 years, she got clemency and went home to her baby. That was pretty cool. So you have these experiences, and people say I make prison sound charming, but there's also about 2 years in between every one of them. So don't think it's not charming. It's quite boring. Um, it's exhausting. I shouldn't say exhausting, but there were just times that I got so sick and tired of myself. Like I just couldn't stand myself anymore. And I ran a pretty solid routine in prison. I read a lot. I wrote my goals every day. People say, "Well, what goals could you possibly write in prison?" I'm like, to be a good friend, to be a good listener, to have honest, open, meaningful relationships with others. Like there's all kinds of goals. They're just not like go out there and accomplish something big in the free world kind of goals, but they're character goals. And those might be the most important goals. And so I started really focusing on the things that I could do right where I was. And my life changed. My soul opened up and I really got to know people in a different way. And it's kind of sacred for me. I remember praying like I've never prayed before. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I was like the only member at this prison. And so I really kind of practiced on my own, and I would fast every Sunday and I would go down to the rec yard and pray. And we had some volunteers that came. I was so grateful that they did, members of my church. And one of the times that we visited, it was my anniversary that day. And I told them that. I said, "Oh, today's my anniversary." And they said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I said, "Sorry?" I said, "Why would you be sorry?" I said, "It's like the greatest thing. My marriage is the greatest thing." "Well, I'm sorry you're not with you'll be with him again." And I said, "How many people really come to know how strong their marriage is? How many people have a husband that stands by them while they're in prison?" I said, "It's a sacred day for me." And it still is for me. When I look back at those years, it brought us to where we are, and we have something really beautiful. So if you haven't listened to the podcast yet that Chad is on, the thing about Chad is he is as humble as it gets. He's never trying to, he just does the right things. And it's crazy that he waited 5 years for me. And he talks about that in the podcast. So you should go check it out. I'm truly so honored and blessed to be his wife. And the thing is, even though we were miles apart, I felt really close to him. And our marriage grew during that time. And by the end of my prison sentence, the thing that I think is probably most profound is that I felt really good about myself. Like, I don't know that I ever felt any better. I looked in the mirror and I thought, I'm a good person. And I felt like I'd always been trying to find that, since I was a young girl. I had this something inside of me, this conflict. That's the only way I can explain it. I have this conflict inside me. My addiction was part of that. I felt separate from everyone else. And prison helped me feel connected to everyone, which makes no sense, right? You're in prison and everybody says, "Oh, it's the worst thing that could ever happen to you." But I think my heart broke. And then I realized how truly connected we all are. And I had come to know who I am and that I have an important purpose on this earth. And it helped me see who everyone else was and how important their purpose was. And the other thing is, where on earth do you go that you don't have a cell phone? Like you can't even be homeless or in Africa without a cell phone. So I went 5 years without a cell phone. And how amazing is that, that I got this chance to get to know myself and connect to others in a real genuine way. I have a lot of faith that the hard things that we go through might be the most important things that we go through. I remember thinking that in prison, this might be the most important thing I ever do. And nobody else really saw it that way. They would think, "Oh, this is just a big waste of time." And I said, "But maybe it's the most important thing. Maybe the world is cheering us on." And there were women that I met that got that. Like I met this girl, her name is Christina. And the first time I saw her, she was filled with light. I wondered, why is she even here? Kind, raised so poor, had nothing. Both of her parents had passed away, and she'd gotten involved in drugs. And I remember hearing her on the phone talk to one of her aunts, and you just kind of notice people when they come in. She had that special light, and her aunt was telling her, "I'll send you some money." And I hear Christine on the other end of the phone. "It's okay. I don't need anything. They take such good care of us here." Who says that in prison? So anyway, I'm getting to the prison. I'm like, "Chad, get me some money now. I need some slip-on shoes." But not Christina. That was just her. And she would go to all the elderly inmates and she'd be like, "Can I take you to breakfast? Do you need anything?" She was 26 years old and filled with light and goodness. And they bunked her with me. It kind of works that way, right? And I would watch her every night pray. She would get on her knees and pray. And I was thinking, man, I got to get some of what she has. And when I left prison, that prison, because I was transferred out of that prison to a different prison. But when I left, she threw her arms around me and she's like, I love you so much, Miss Portia. Will I see you again? And since I've gotten home, she reached out, and that sweet girl went and got a job, got in college, has a really great job now. And she and I have spent some of the most incredible moments together out here. She'll be coming out to see me again in October. I'm going to talk her into getting on the podcast because she's amazing. But that's what prison was like. I met so many people that desperately needed to be seen and known for who they really are, not a screw up, but somebody who's had a really hard life and is trying to climb out. When people ask me, what can we do for people in prison? I say, believe in them. That's what you can do. You can believe in them because they're amazing. And I know, like, I have people try to get me into advocacy. Let's change this. Let's do that. And I'm like, just believe in the people. Strengthen the people. They'll come out and do amazing things. It's hard for me to hear all the rotten stories. I mean, sure, there's rotten things that go on, but there's so many beautiful things that go on too. So I'm at Waseca. I spend a couple years there, and they tell me I'm going to get a year off my prison sentence if I go to the RDAP program. RDAP is Residential Drug and Alcohol Program. It's an intense program. You go live in a unit and you basically call each other out. You tell on each other. And that's hard to do in prison. Like, assertive communication goes something like this. I feel hurt when you threaten my life. Like, you're in prison. Conflict resolution, right? People, it's very escalated. And they made me a leader in the program. And I was very determined to be honest and work the program the right way, which means that you really do have to call people out. And I remember there was a girl that was in the program that was doing a life sentence, which was kind of odd. Typically, but they put her in there. And her girlfriend also was in the program. And I remember the first time I walked in and her girlfriend was screaming and yelling at someone. What happens in prison is it gets hot, especially in Waseca. And in the summer, when they don't have air conditioning and we have these loud cargo fans that just, they're loud and obnoxious, and everybody gets crazy. So I walk into the unit and somebody had touched the fan the wrong way and somebody had yelled and she had yelled and everyone was yelling. I walked in and I was like, this is not how, I mean, this is a program where we're supposed to learn to communicate with each other. So the next morning I go up to the front of the room in front of 70 people and I call this girl out and say, hey, you know, I don't appreciate it when you're aggressive in the unit. And I look out into the audience and there's her girlfriend who's serving a life sentence. And she looks at me and she goes, you're it's like, oh, okay. And I remember feeling quite sick to my stomach. And I went back to my bunk and I sat on my bunk for about 5 minutes. I have my arms crossed and I'm like, she did not just do that. And then I thought, oh, no, she didn't. So I walked back downstairs to where her room was. And I said, you said you were my friend and you threatened me. And friends don't threaten each other. And she goes, mad respect, Louder. That took courage. Which was, it could have gone a different way, right? But I figured I'm not going to walk around the unit and have somebody and be afraid that somebody's going to hit me in the head with something. I'm just going to go get it over with now. And she goes, you don't have to worry about me. I'll never bother you. I said, I am working this program for my integrity. I'm trying to do the right thing. She's like, yeah, do your program. Call anyone out you want. And from that point on, she was true to her word. And I worked an honest program. It was a clean house, which means that we called each other out. Because what happens in a program like that is if everybody's breaking the rules and we're all keeping a conspiracy, it's called the criminal code, then the energy gets funky. But there were enough people that wanted to work the program, and I chose to work the program. And this is where I learned I'm actually a really good leader. In fact, my counselor told me, she's like, you might be the strongest leader I've ever met. She goes, be careful, Louder, because if you're leading in the wrong direction, you know what will happen. And that's, you know, it is really important to me now to lead in the right direction. So when I got done with RDAP, I felt like something profound had happened. Like there was this feeling of restoration and healing. And I was about a year to the gate, which means a year until my sentence was done, maybe a little more than a year. And the counselor told me, hey, Louder, your security level is so low, we're just going to send you to a camp. Because I'd been doing my time at higher security prisons. In the federal system, there's only FCI for women, which is behind a fence, 10-minute moves. It's people are doing life there. Or there's a camp, which is low security. You can walk off the camp. They'll give you another 5 years if you do, but it's usually people that aren't violent or have their short time in it. They have less time. And people ask why I went to a high security prison because they put a management variable on me. And I asked and I did never get a really good answer. But in the end, I was grateful for the time that I did in the higher security because I learned things I wouldn't have learned. So anyway, the counselor tells me, hey, Louder, we're going to send you to a camp. And turns out that my security level's so low, they bought me a plane ticket and they have a camp driver drive me to the airport. So just imagine, I've been locked up for 4 years. I've been behind a fence for 4 years. I'm terrified to get in a car, let alone go to an airport. And they drop me off with my with my prison security. I mean, that's my ID, my prison ID. And I walk in and I'm completely overwhelmed. I remember I went to the bathroom and I had like a whole roll of toilet paper on my shoe. And some guy came up and he goes, you have toilet paper on your shoe. And I'm like, I am so scared. I am not paying attention. I'm in my prison sweats. And I walk up to a employee there and I'm like, hey, listen, I don't know how to get to a plane or anything. And I don't have an ID and I just have this. And she's like, she looks at the prison ID and she goes, I go, I'm not violent. She goes, all right, follow me. I'm not holding you up. This is not a threat. I just need to get to the plane. So she takes me to the airplane. I get on the airplane and I sit down and I'm feeling again like, well, I haven't been around a cell phone for so long. And there's these two people sitting next to me and they didn't even look up once. 3-4 hours to California. Not one time did they look up from their cell phone. They're just, and that was so strange to me because everyone that came to prison, I would say, oh, hi, how are you? I'm Portia. Do you need any help? Like it just seemed like I thought didn't even ask my name. I'm kind of interesting. They didn't even want to know me. I would have told them, hey, I just got out of prison. Nobody cared. And now, I've been out for a while and I get it. Like you get on a plane, you want to be left alone, but it was shocking because that's not what I was experiencing in prison. So I get to the airport in California, again, overwhelmed. They gave me $10 to go get a meal. Ashamed to say again, I could not make a decision, so I went to McDonald's. And I mean, I had visions of I'm going to get healthy food, vegetables. I haven't had it for years. I just want a salad, a real good salad. I went to McDonald's. I was too nervous and too scared to make a decision. So had my McDonald's food and then went out and found a taxi driver. He had given me enough money for the taxi driver. Told him I need to go to Victorville prison camp. He's like, why are you going to a camp? I said, because that's where I'm going to be living. He's like, why are you in prison? You don't seem like a bad person. I was like, well, I don't think I am. And there's a lot of nice people in prison. He's like, really? I said, really? So we had a pretty good conversation on the way to the prison camp. And by the time I got to the camp, he gave me his card and he goes, hey, you seem great. If you ever need anything, let me know, which was cool, right? So I walk into the prison camp. Now, this is crazy. I've been in Minnesota and it's so cold. I'm behind a fence. I walk into Victorville and you just walk right in. There wasn't even an officer in the officer's station. I asked one of the girls are just walking around. There's palm trees. It's quite warm in Victorville. It's January 15th. And I said, where's an officer? They said, oh, we'll go find her. You have to go find I mean, it's not like that at a higher security prison. So I say, hey, I'm Louder. And she goes, oh, okay. Well, I guess we're supposed to check you in. And I have a picture. I should include the picture. I was so happy to be at the prison camp. She said, I've never seen anyone so happy to be in prison. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel like prison to me. I mean, it was much different than what I was used to. But the cool thing about the federal system is that we all know each other. I had been at the prison in Dublin, California, and I had been blogging. So they knew me as the blogger, which I kind of got some respect for because it's like, oh, you kind of bucked the system. So, as soon as I got to Victorville, I walked into the unit and this lady named Gypsy walks up to me and she said, oh, hey, Louder. She's like, you're the blogger lady from Dublin. If you need anything, just let me know. She's like, I'm the biggest, baddest white lady on the compound. I can get you anything you need. That's just how it goes in prison. I'm like, thanks, Gypsy. And what was cool was that one of my friends from Waseca was already there. So I went and found her. Her name was Macy. If you want to hear more, you got to go look up Living Louder, my book, because I share a lot of these stories in that book. But so Macy and I became really close. She was from Utah too. And she's like, hey, I got you shoes. I got you a t-shirt. I got you a pack of tuna, whatever you need. Right. And so that began my journey at the camp. One of the cool things about the camp was that I could be outside almost whenever I wanted. I'd get up at 5 a.m. I love the sun. I love the desert. So they'd open up the unit and I'd just go sit outside under the sun and sit on a bench, and I felt a lot of peace and gratitude because I was at the end, and the counselor calls me in and she's like, "Hey, Louder, you've done every program. It's time to go home. We'll send you home on May 7th." And I was excited because Jackson was graduating high school. I had been gone through all of his high school years. Chad and I had been emailing each other. You can email in prison. You don't have internet access, but you can email. And so every morning we would, we were just so excited. And on May 7th, the counselor called me back in and said, "We're going to keep you 3 more months." I remember being physically sick. I said, and I've been in prison long enough to know, I said, "Is there any way you could not do that?" She's like, "No, yeah, that's what we're doing." So I went and called Chad and I said, "Honey, I am sorry." He's like, "Porsche, this really sucks for all of us, for the kids, for me." I said, "I know." He's like, We'll do it. We'll get through it." But it was pretty discouraging. I would go to the chapel every morning and I'd just get on my knees and cry. I was like, "Hey, Heavenly Father, like I kind of did everything. I know you can fix this, please." And I remember that Sunday, some volunteers came in that were LDS or members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And one of them said, "Hey, Sister Louder, can I give you a blessing?" Which is kind of a prayer. It's a special prayer. And he said this. He said, "Sister Louder, your Heavenly Father knows you, and you were prepared to do everything you've done on this earth. And he has endowed you with strength. And you will speak to the youth of the church, and he's mindful of you." And after that blessing, I went over, I called Chad and I said, "Chad, our Father in heaven is with us on this. Let's make the best of this time. And no matter how long they keep me, I'm going to walk out of prison happy, joyous, and free." And I knew then that I got to decide the ending. No matter what happened, it was my decision how I was going to, what this experience would mean. And that last 3 months, I sat in the sun, I read, I prayed, and I prepared to come home. And 3 months later, they called my name over the intercom. And that's something everyone waits for. I had watched girls leave for almost 5 years. And when they call your name louder over the intercom, it was, I don't even know how to describe it. I walked out of the unit and I had a box, and all it had was pictures and letters in it. And I felt like the richest woman on the planet. The experiences that I'd had and who I had become. My friend Macy said, "Let me walk you to the gate." And I remember when Macy walked me out, Chad was waiting with flowers. And Macy said, "I love you so much, Portia." I said, "I love you too, friend. I'll be in touch." And then when I got in the car, just holding Chad's hand felt amazing. And I remember all the girls came running out. "We love you, Miss Portia. We love you." And they're honking because it's a compound. And I can't even describe how full my heart was. I loved these women. I knew what they had been through, and I had served them. And it was like this grand adventure that I was going to, and yet a big piece of my heart was still in that prison. And when Chad and I, on our way home, I was overwhelmed by phones, by people calling, by food, by choices. And I was so grateful to be with him because he's calm. And I just held his hand and we drove, and we stopped on our way to the halfway house. I had to go back to a halfway house. That's probably going to be another video, another podcast. But we stopped on the side of the road and all of our kids were there. And I got to give each of our kids a hug. It had been a long time since we'd all been together because I was so far away that the older ones would come or Chad would come with the little ones, and it wasn't often. And then I went to the halfway house, and it was this beginning of my life, this brand new life. And when I got to the halfway house, it was overwhelming. Halfway house is worse than prison. I honestly wanted to go back to prison. I thought, I don't want to be here. I just want to go back to prison. And I remember I was sitting there on a bench, and this guy, he came up and he goes, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I don't want to be here. I feel really strange." And he goes, "Well, I saw your husband and your daughter." And he goes, "You'll be okay." He goes, "Your daughter looks just like you. Your husband seems like a great guy." And I still just felt so awkward and weird. And he goes, "You know what surprised me the most about prison?" And I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "That mayonnaise made everything taste better." And that's when I just started laughing. And I was like, Yeah, it so did. We all walked around with the bottle of mayonnaise to kind of spruce the food up, and that's when I knew, "I gotta talk about this." 'Cause it's different. Like, I've experienced something that's changed me, and if I pretend like I haven't experienced it or I hide from it, it won't be okay. Like, I need to talk about it. And I spent my time at the halfway house. I got a job taking pictures. That's what my family does. And I remember walking into the schools, those little elementary schools, and thinking, this feels awfully a lot like prison to me. And then I got a job working in drug treatment, and I loved it because I felt connected to the women. If remi and I would share my prison stories because they loved them, and my heart was so full. And then I'm working grave shifts, and I decide I'm going to write a book. I don't know how, but I'm just going to do it. And I had read somewhere that if there's lots of things that you probably need to know to write a book, but if you're passionate, you can override a lot of it. And I thought I got that going for me. I'm passionate, and so I started writing an outline, and I wrote a book, and I published it, and I sent it into my friends in prison, and they were like, "This is our story." And life has just continued. And I've been home now for 6 years. Now I'm starting this podcast. And mm, I have, my life has changed so much. It's a completely different view. I get to go to prisons. I get to go talk to people who are ready to go serve a mission for the church that I belong to. And I speak about my experiences. And I have so much faith and hope in people going through the hard things. And so that's the Living Louder podcast and a little bit of my story. You'll hear more from me as I talk to people who've been to prison, people who have had family members who have been to prison, some of my family members and friends, and then just people that have had hard experiences or maybe people that have had amazing experiences. We're going to have lots of guests and lots of experiences. And so thank you guys for following along.